It is time to count down the big uglies, the tackles, the offensive line. Hell, I'd be surprised if we got 100 views on this shit because nobody cares about the offensive lineman. But it is a very, very important position in the NFL. We're going to break it down right now. Brandon Albert is here. I'm Adrian FedQ. How's it going, man?
Count down the big uglies.
Fellas, let's do it.
Echo
We're
is
gonna talk about you know, and
all right, we good.
and here's the kind of thing that's probably like the most common phrase when the word offensive line is used is insert team name. So let's say Eagles offensive line sucks. That's like the most times that the word offensive line is used. Well, my point is, guys, is not that everyone's offensive line is bad. Is the fact that we only talk about offensive line when things aren't going the right way. When things are going well, we're like, okay, we don't talk about them. And the only time we really talk about them is after our running back is like leading the NFL in rushing or is at least sacks allowed, things like that. But it's vitally important. So I'm excited to talk about the big boys today.
Yeah, they're not sexy names at all, and whenever they get drafted, everybody groans. But it's a really, really important selection. And number one, actually, I think you got a different number one than I do, right? I got Cam Robinson at number one, but you do not. So I'll let you go first and give out your number one.
Yeah, I got Ryan Ramczyk as my number one offensive tackle. When I'm looking at Ramczyk, okay, I think his biggest thing he needs to improve at is he needs to improve on depth in his first two slides, especially if he's going to continue to play left tackle. And when I'm talking about depth, I'm talking about his first two kick slides. I'm not saying he needs to turn around and run, but he needs to get a little more depth because what's going to happen is if he starts facing wide nine guys and he's not getting depth in his first two slides, at best he's going to get one left hand on him, and he's in deep, deep trouble. Now that he's also coming back from a hip surgery, but he reminds me a lot of Joe Staley. I mean, he's really solid in everything he does. I think Ramczyk is the most polished left tackle we have in this draft. That said, we don't have a great deal of tackles options out here.
Yeah, I like the Joe Staley comparison. He just seems to me like he's just going to be a rock solid type of player, rock solid in both pass protection and run blocking. Obviously, that Wisconsin running game, I mean, you have to be a great run blocker. So, yeah, you said it perfectly. I don't need to proceed any further. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Ramczyk's my one. My two is is actually Cam Robinson, who's your one.
Yeah.
Now, Cam's thing is I think he's probably a better guard than a tackle. Reminds me a lot of Kelechi Osemele, now playing for the Raiders, formerly of the Ravens. Big, physical, nasty right guard, wants to be a road grader. Probably could play right tackle in the right situation as well, but I think his physicality, and he's a little limited in his pass blocking sets. He likes to lift up a little bit. I think he's probably a little better interior and being a nasty interior road grader than out wide. So he would be my number two tackle, but really I think in the NFL he's probably going to go to guard.
Yeah, I mean, God, I think of Orlando Franklin, and you know when you say that, and you look at Cam Robinson, I mean, he's 6'6", he's like 320, 330, about the same type of size as him. And when you watch them at Alabama, obviously a lot better as a run blocker than as a pass protector. And the one game I watched against Tennessee, Derek Barnett made mincemeat of him. Couldn't handle the speed. So, yeah, I would agree with you. Guard might actually be a better fit for him, even though I'm sure he's going to get drafted as a tackle.
Oh, I'm sure he will be, and it's one of those things where think about it. Laremy Tunsil was the 14th pick, or no, not that high. He was drafted, but he came out as a quote tackle, and he ended up playing most of the year at guard. Yeah. Now this year it looks like the Dolphins are going to translate him back into tackle. I could see a very, very similar path for Cam Robinson, upcoming year. Now my three guy is a guy. If you're someone who wants to draft potential, then you definitely like Garett Bolles. The reason I have him as three is he's a really, really good zone blocker and a really nasty SOB. So he's really, really good in those type of sets. So if you're a team drafting lower in the first, Denver's obviously the big zone blocking team. Or if you're a team like the Redskins who just wants to keep getting nastier and nastier in the O-line, Bowles makes a lot of sense. Now his trade-off is he's actually only played 1 year of Division I football. He was a junior college guy, and then he ended up coming out. So, we talk a lot about, of a Mitch Trubisky and how he doesn't have a large body of work. Well, neither does Bowles. And, especially if I'm looking at someone to play my left tackle position, which usually is the second or third highest paid guy on my team, I want stability. I want to know what he's done at the highest level. And with Garrett Bowles, he doesn't have a large body of work. So if you're drafting late first, I think he'd be a good pick for you, as long as you're willing to kind of say, this guy might take a little longer to develop because he hasn't had much high competition around him.
Yeah. My number 2, by the way, Ryan Ramczyk. We don't really need to get into that any further. I mean, dude, after you speak, there's like nothing for me to say.
I'll steal it all. I'm a jerk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll say this: it seems like Utah just produces these linemen left and right, but do any of them really pan out? Seems like not really.
Not overly. I mean, Utah. I mean, again, this goes back to like our wide receiver conversation. You draft the name, not the logo, but there's definitely a fair kind of thought process there.
Yeah, because they're always coming out. I mean, yeah. So. Yeah, Bowles is my number 3 as well. Who's your number 4?
So my 4, and this is where I had to go hometown, T for Temple U, Temple May, Temple Tough, Philly Proud, Dion Dawkins. Okay, so Dion has a lot of similar stuff that Cam's got going, in that he's probably going to be drafted, as a quote tackle, but I think his future is going to be at guard. He's big, he's nasty, he's physical. Now his thing, when you watch Dion's film, a lot of times you watch his hand placement, and he gets a little wide. And my concern here is when, if you think about power, your power really comes from your shoulder width apart. Yeah. Dion likes to get a little wider than that. And now he's starting to get into like a bench press match. And in college, and with all due respect, in the American, look, you can do that against Tulane and UConn and Navy, and you can win the bench press battle. But, when you're lining up against, DNs like J.J. Watts and other guys like that, you're going to get put on your ass, So that's a little bit of a concern for me. The other thing is, when in his pass pro, you don't notice it a ton, but sometimes he doesn't do a great job of sinking his hips and allowing him really to punch, and he gets high. So then what does he do? He falls into a bad habit and tries to headbutt. And this is not something that's really uncommon for offensive linemen, but as we're seeing the physicality of the game improve, concussions, et cetera, it's a bit of an issue for me. So Dion's one of those guys. He's probably going to go mid-second, but honestly, if this was a better tackle class, he'd probably be a mid-third round pick.
Yeah, I was actually going to put Dawkins with the guards, but you know what? I'll put him in the tackles as well. So this means I'm now changing my list. So I'm going to put him at number 4 as well. I like Dawkins. I mean, you said he plays with that mean streak. I think he's got some agility in his game as well, because I've seen him get to the second level. You're right about the technique. But that's why you're going to go to the NFL. You're going to learn this shit. You're going to have an offensive line coach teaching you technique. So yeah, I'm with you on Dion Dawkins. Obviously, T for Temple U. So there's some bias here, but he's deserving of a top 5 ranking.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think again, he's probably going to be a guard. Like Cam's probably going to be a guard, but he's definitely a top 5 guy in my mind. He had a really good Senior Bowl. He had a really good combine. He's one of those guys that, the Senior Bowl, he really wants to brand and market, because those are the guys at the Senior Bowl saying, thank you. I'm so thankful guys like you are coming to Senior Bowl, making yourself some money. He's a big, big winner moving forward.
Yeah, so the thing with him is it's going to be really important that he goes to a team with a great offensive line coach. That's the thing. Another guy that impressed at the Senior Bowl, my number 5 guy, is Antonio Garcia from Troy. Now, it's hard to watch him because he's in the Sun Belt, but the great thing is that draft breakdown, you can watch any game you want, and the clips, in like 10 minutes or less. So it's hard to get a good evaluation on him because he plays in the Sun Belt, but I did like what I saw at the Senior Bowl. And not that I'm putting that much stock into it, but that's why he's in my top 5.
No, that's completely fair. I mean, he's another guy who excelled in the Senior Bowl. I think Garcia is probably one of the better pass blockers. Now, I think Bowles is the best athlete we have of tackles here. So, if you're a team who wants to run a lot of tackle pull and kind of creative things, the Bulls probably makes a lot of fit. Garcia, the thing that he really stood out for me when I watched the combine was in that rabbit drill. And the rabbit drill is when, you get two cones set apart and the offensive lineman is already set in his pass stance. He's got to slide laterally as a dummy, or the rabbit, we call him, runs cone to cone and flips. Yeah. Garcia did a great job of not, you hear this all the time, don't cross your feet. And honestly, when you get to this point, it should be common sense. If you're crossing your feet, there's a lot of issues going on. But the thing that I like so much about Garcia is he played with weights in his hips. And what I mean by that, he was in a good stance the entire time. He was quick. He was on his toes. He was able to move laterally. And his nose pretty much always split the rabbit the entire time. So he's a guy, he's probably my five offensive tackle. Where does he go? Mid to late second is my guess. But again, honestly, it's just not a good tackle. It's not a good offensive line year. So his skill is probably more the third, but the demand of it, he's going to get drafted higher, especially with how many good edge pass rushers we have. These tackles are going to get drafted higher than they probably deserve.
Yeah, I mean, the dude moves. You said it. He's a great athlete. Gets to the second level of these. So we'll just see what he can do at the pro level. He's not in the Sun Belt anymore.
No doubt.
Yeah. Anybody else you want to talk about? I mean, like we said, it's not really a great offensive line class. It's like the wide receivers. I mean, are there really any sleepers you like?
The two names I'm hearing that are starting to rise up the draft boards is actually both tackles from Texas A&M.
That's a school that always produces tackles, like every year.
Yeah, A&M's one of those teams you always hear kind of producing late tackles. And the thing is A&M, they go a little wider splits with their offensive line, and that helps because they run such a spread-heavy team. In turn, what happens, it creates a larger pocket for their quarterback, so that's kind of the offensive scheme. What happens now is these tackles are more on a true one-on-one situation and not necessarily getting as much stunts as you would think because the defensive line has to worry about run gaps. But both of the tackles from A&M are starting to create a little buzz. Both of them had good pro days, which is important this time of the year. So when you get to this point, I mean, those are guys I would say. There's also, I think it's a Julie Davenport from Bucknell. He's another guy who's starting to get a little buzz. And the question then becomes, well, okay, are you okay drafting an FCS player? I mean, my thought process is I'm okay with it if you're okay drafting a number one tackle who's only played 13 games in Division 1A. So, those are guys I would kind of say are sleepers, probably guys in the third to fifth round. I mean, I don't think any of them necessarily are starters in the league per se, but they're definitely guys who probably could walk in your offensive line room and be on your 2 list.
Yeah, gotcha. What do you think about the Western Michigan kid, Taylor Moton?
Yeah, Taylor Moton's another one I do like. I wouldn't say he's a sleeper per se. I mean, he's definitely above that. Yeah. Taylor's probably going to be the 5th or the 6th tackle drafted off the board. He's another one, depending on what you like for Antonio Garcia. I think Garcia's a little better of an athlete, a little more fluid. But Taylor, I mean, he's a very well-polished guy. And the problem with Taylor is I think he's kind of capped out. I mean, I don't see a lot more development in him. He's certainly a guy who could probably make, anywhere from 5 to 10 years in the NFL serving as a rotational backup, but I don't really see the flash or the potential in him like I see in the others.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to think for the Eagles-wise. I mean, are they really going to take a tackle? They drafted Halapoulivaati Vaitai last year in the 5th round. Struggled against Washington, but kind of got better as the year went along. Obviously, Jason Peters getting up there in age. Lane Johnson at some point is going to make that transition from right tackle to left tackle. So are the Eagles, do you think maybe they would draft a lineman to develop or just kind of leave the tackle position alone?
Well, I think there's certainly a need there, and I think the Sidney Jones injury opens up a bigger question mark for what the Eagles do in that first. I think if Sidney Jones was sitting there, I think he's the dude, no doubt. So now it becomes a little bit of a question. Do you like who do you like more? Do you like Conley from Ohio State as a corner? Are you okay with him in the first round? If so, he might be sitting there. No. I think the receivers are going to be gone. Fair enough. I think all 3 receivers are going to be gone. So I think it's wishful thinking for the Eagles fans to think that the receiver is going to be there. I think they'll be gone. So then it really becomes, are you okay looking at a running back, probably like McCaffrey or Cook, or do you want to go with a tackle like Bowles, who's probably a little more athletic and maybe is going to be something to kind of develop and grow? Personally, for me, I probably would take a tackle there if I was in that spot between a guy like Bowles or one of the running backs. And the reason I say that is lack of depth at running back. In the second and third round, I could probably still get a decent running back to kind of use and use an RB by committee kind of thing.
Yeah. I think the Eagles will draft a tackle. I think it'll be like in the middle rounds, just to develop somebody. Because you'll have Big V, you'll have somebody else now to develop, and hopefully one of those guys emerges and becomes your kind of mainstay right tackle as Lane transitions to left tackle. So
that's certainly fair.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to go first round tackle or even second round. I don't think it's a big enough need at the moment. Even though I'll tell you what, if it was a better class and there were better prospects, I definitely think they would consider it because of the Peters thing. But yeah, I don't think there's anybody that's like great enough to pick at 14 that would. How do I want to say this? Yeah, no one at 14 I would take over like any other positions.
I don't think you're wrong, Adrian. I mean, I think and my rationale is if it was a better class, then you wouldn't need to take one in the first round because you probably could get a good one in the second.
That's true.
That's really my rationale for saying, hey, if we think there's depth in corner that we could get Sidney Jones in the second, or we could get Tease Tabor in the second, or we could get Amora from Tennessee in the second, then I could say, okay, let's draft Bowles because we think the drop off between the top 3 to 5 tackles is much steeper than what it is with running back or corner.
Yeah. Like Davenport, the kid from Bucknell, would be a perfect get in the middle rounds for the Eagles because he is a guy that needs to learn technique. He is raw and let him kind of sit on the bench for a couple years and learn. So, that I would not be surprised if Davenport's name gets called in Philadelphia.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very good middle round draft to see who develops or the offensive line. If you have a couple picks there, if you're a team like the Eagles or the Ravens who traditionally have a lot of the 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks, this is a good draft to kind of take flyers on guys and see what happens.
Yeah. All right. That's all I got on the agenda. We're about to do our top 5 interior linemen next. So you got any departing words you got? Final thought?
No, I think it's going to be unique, though. I hope you guys stick around and you listen to the interior because when we go interior, you might hear some similar names, but in different orders. So check that out in a moment here, guys.
Yes, sir. There it is. Brendan, I'm Adrian. We'll be right back.